Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining this webinar today. My name is Erica Lundstedt, and I am the Global Education Manager here at the World Affairs Council of Cincinnati and Northern Kentucky. We're glad that you've joined us for this webinar on the power of storytelling in communicating ideas. This is the second webinar in our Skills for Students Future in the World Global Competency series. So we're happy to have you here today. Joining us later will be two panelists from nonprofits in the Cincinnati area. Spring Starr Pillow will be joining us from WordPlay Cincinnati, and Dr. Kate Currie from MAKETANK Inc. and the Illustrated Memoirs Project will be talking to us later. And it looks like Spring is joining us now. So the format for today's webinar, we've got a few folks watching us on Facebook Live, and we'll be joining the Zoom here on out. So we will start with a quick discussion on some resources about today's topic. You'll get a folder of resources via Google Drive in your email at the end of this session. So be on the lookout for some of the resources that we mentioned there. And then after we talk resources, we will hear from Spring from WordPlay as she's joined us just now. And then we will hear from Dr. Kate Currie from MAKETANK. So at any point, if you have any questions for our presenters, if you would like to put them in the chat or the Q&A function at the bottom of your Zoom application, we will make sure that we leave time for questions. All right. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started with some resources. So we are happy that you've joined us here, and we have some objectives for you in what we'd like you to achieve as a result of this session. So what we're hoping for is that you at least start the process of thinking of how communication skills can contribute to global competency, which is something that we think of highly here at the council, and we'll show you a little bit more on the rubrics that we use for global competency skills here. We're going to look at different methods of communication and how that can help students address different audiences and also get students more engaged in the lessons that you're already planning. We'll share different educational resources, and hopefully you've got some that you can bookmark to use later as a result of this webinar. And those of you who are looking for contact hours or CEUs, we will send you a follow-up survey. And what we're hoping that you'll be able to do is identify a concept or a unit in which you would like to implement a new method of communication. So whether it be speeches or poetry or anything that you get inspired by today, we're hoping that this can start a journey into enhancing your lessons with different communications. So feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat if you are there. And we'll go ahead and get started with some framing and some resources before we hear from our presenters. Great. So I want to start off with our framework for global competency, since this is a global competency series here from the World Affairs Council. And if you were with our January inquiry webinar, we investigated the world, which was that first global competency domain from the Asia Society Global Competency Matrix. And so today, with different methods of communication, we're really looking at the third competency in the matrix, which is communicating ideas, hence the title of this webinar. So what we want to do in terms of communicating ideas, we want to take a look at ways in which students can recognize and express how diverse audiences could perceive different meanings from the same information and how that impacts communication. So really, in some of these different methods, students will be asked to think about who their audience is and what opportunities might there be for miscommunication. So really forcing students to kind of plan ahead and know their audience. We want them to be able to listen and communicate effectively with diverse audiences using appropriate verbal and nonverbal behavior. So Spring has experience kind of with like the theater world. And so verbal and nonverbal behavior and communication is really important in those disciplines as well. We'll look at different technologies. So part of that domain requires students select and use appropriate technology and media for communication. So really thinking about which is going to be most effective in delivering their message. And then finally, reflecting on how communication impacts a person's understanding and collaboration in an interdependent world. So there are so many ways that we get information, or lots of different methods of communication, but what's effective and what's the best method of delivering information based on what the information is. So we have to think about those things as well. So today we're kind of focusing on the storytelling aspect, and in some of the methods and resources, you might not see storytelling in the way that you would normally think of storytelling. But as our speakers will discuss a little bit later on, there are a lot of powerful aspects to storytelling to level up your lessons and increase in student engagement here. And so a few reasons why we thought this was powerful. It forces students to improve their listening and comprehension skills. And so when we tell stories, we are more naturally engaged in what someone is saying, and we have to listen effectively. So it practices those skills as well. A lot of times when people share their stories, it elicits some sort of response. And so sometimes we can initiate writing and further communication in reflection on someone's story, or we could get inspired by someone's story and have a different direction that we would want to take as a result of that. So writing skills there as well. And then we're looking at a deeper connection to the issue and topic. A lot of times if we see a big topic like climate change, it's really easy to get inundated with information on that topic on a day-to-day basis. But if it impacts someone we know, or someone where we know their story, we've got that deeper connection. So it's a way to make things a bit more meaningful. And also as a way to enhance community. People like to be seen and heard and acknowledged. And if we have a better understanding of the people that we go to school with and the people that we work with on a regular basis, we can have a more enhanced sense of community. So there are a lot of good reasons why we would use this in the classroom. So when I share some quick resources here, I want you to think of your variety of learners. So for today, we kind of divided them into the students who like to speak, those who like to write, and what we're calling our artists. Maybe those students are theatrical, maybe they are great graphic designers, but we really don't want to limit ourselves to one particular method of communication. So if you feel like you've been stuck in a rut with how you've had your students respond to different topics, try changing it up, and maybe you'll see a student who you might not hear from very often really blossom and grow as a result of what you've introduced in the classroom. So I want to start with our speakers here and some of the resources that we have for practicing speaking skills in the classroom. There are a lot of different ways to go about this, and it doesn't have to be necessarily just speeches, but lots of different disciplines that we can touch on. So I wanted to share one of the first educational sites that is very helpful for people who are thinking of storytelling in the traditional sage on the stage aspect, and that is the Moth. So some of you might be familiar with the Moth. The Moth has a storytelling platform. They were in Memorial Hall OTR just, I think, a few weeks ago on a local tour. But the Moth has kind of the Moth radio hour, and a lot of times we can listen to personal stories there in a way that's engaging. And so the Moth has also increased their educational outreach programs. And in your resource packet that you'll get later today, you're going to see a one-pager on their keys to storytelling. And so this is something that our presenters might touch on later because they work with students closely, but these are things to remind your students when it comes to sharing. And these are their 4 keys to storytelling. Good stories, the character changes from the beginning to the end. So there's going to be an element of change there. And then the second aspect is sharing your story has to have stakes involved. So if it's not something that kind of scares you a little bit in terms of sharing your story, then maybe it's a better essay. So what do you stand to gain by sharing your story? Is it awareness? Is it just kind of personal growth and development? Why is this important to you? And then for the educational aspect, knowing where your story is heading, and this is good writing and good speaking. We like stories because they have a beginning, middle, and end. They're easy to follow. That's kind of why we're drawn to them. And so reminding students that they would follow that format as well. And then also being yourself. In the Moth, they recognize that, not everybody is a stand-up comic. Not everybody likes to share really dark personal aspects to themselves. So it's going to be most authentic when you are your true authentic self. So that's a good resource to look at. The Moth also has different resources for educators that they are starting to build up. So if you go to their website on the Moth, you're going to see a separate section for educators. And the Moth has also produced a few books recently where they've published short stories and stories from some of their Moth events in sort of collections. So this All These Wonders collection came out a few years ago. It's stories about the unknown. I've seen this book used in a lot of like freshman seminars for colleges. And there's an educator guide to that, which is going to be in your resource packet. So if that's something that you want to teach with stories, I would look at that. And they also have great teacher institutes and storytelling schools if you're really looking to increase your knowledge on, knowing the background of creating safe spaces for students to share their stories or how to get students more engaged. I highly recommend that you check out those resources there at the Moth. Other things for our storytellers, we've got TED Ed, which a lot of teachers are going to recognize TED Ed for their short educational videos and explainers, a lot of which are animated. But at TED Ed, they also have the TED style talks, but for students. So they call them the TED Ed Student Talks. One of the nice things about the TED Ed Student Talks program is it is on a semester basis. So there are different time periods where you can apply to actually host a TED style event at your school. And if that's an undertaking that you want to do, you do get the benefits of mentorship with other schools and students and teachers that have gone through that before. And that's a way for your students to be connected to a larger national and global community. So if your students are really excited about sharing their stories, there are more good resources if you check out TED Ed Clubs or TED Ed Student Talks. Another good resource for those who like to tell stories and are speakers is Storycorps. So Storycorps is also a podcast that you might hear on NPR. And Storycorps has the Great Thanksgiving Listen, or the Great Listen, which is really something that they've built out for educators. And so Storycorps really focuses on interviewing and the skills that students would gain from interviewing, such as listening and empathy. You'll see Storycorps active in the community with their Airstream. In this picture, you can see the last time that they visited Cincinnati, which I believe was 2017. They are in front of the Freedom Center there. And a lot of times they like to get stories from people who have lived through different historical events or people from different cultures. And I've seen this in the classroom where teachers will like to have their students interview a veteran around Veterans Day. So there are lots of different opportunities for students to kind of reach out across generations, across cultures, and really learn how to plan and execute an interview properly. If that's something that you're interested in doing, they also have great educational resources on their website. They have the Storycorps DIY approach. If you're not doing the Thanksgiving program, but you're still interested in having your students do interviews, there are different course contents that are kind of self-directed modules where you can learn effective interviewing, active listening, different things like that. And they also have their own Storycorps app to make it easy for your students to learn how to actually record and edit their interviews. So a lot of great things on their website. Also for students who are talkers there, we've got Project Audio, which is a program of the New York Times and the New York Times' Learning Network. For those of us who really like podcasts, they do have an annual student podcasting contest, which runs from April 6th to May 18th. This is really nice because it will involve students from all different backgrounds, and you can do this virtually in any class, 5 minutes or less on any topic. So they've got a lot of freedom there. There's no annual theme or anything that you have to fit the guidelines of. And they also have educational content to kind of support you in that journey if you are interested in having your students participate in the podcast contest, which that might not be the be all end all goal for everyone, but there are lots of different self-directed modules, kind of like what you saw with Storycorps. So storytelling, interviewing, and editing are skills that you would learn from Project Audio. So they are also a treasure trove of resources. Also with the Learning Center there from the New York Times, there are mini lessons, graphic organizers, and other things that you can use as a way to implement this project into the classroom. Lots of folks like their 1-minute podcast assignment as kind of a low stakes way to introduce podcasting into the classroom. And then also sharing the different resources that the New York Times has. They have their daily podcast, which is very short, informational to get students kind of interested in topical news articles. And they have lots of things on their learning network where you can actually teach and interact with the news. So lots of things to check out regarding the New York Times in your resource folder. Also want to recognize our writers here. So when we talk about writing in the classroom, we'll see a little bit more from our speakers later on. But I do want to bring up journaling because this is something that's really easy to do in a variety of classes here. Different ways that teachers have done journaling, asking students to respond to a stimulus, a video, a text, whatnot. And we can take journaling a step further and introduce digital journaling as well. I know this has probably lost some of its luster after the pandemic and we all had to teach online and a lot of our students had to Zoom online, but I've also been effective with discussion threads. So different discussion posts based on topics where you're actively showing students how to respond to one another. So you might ask a student to use Schoology or whatever your learning management system is to respond to a thread, but really prompt your students to respond to each other in a healthy way as well. So I developed a rubric for what we called econ journals, where they would have to respond to 2 different people in a way that was not just, I agree what you said, or I thought that was interesting, but really encouraging them to respond back. And if you've seen like Facebook comment threads, you know this is a skill that not everybody has, but it is something that is worth developing. So really using this as a way to kind of check in and get the pulse of your students, depending on where they are in the lesson or how they felt about a particular topic. We also have editorial writing, which I think is really important to the work that we do here at the World Affairs Council because it's a way to make global issues local. So allow students to create a personal connection and also perfect that persuasive writing. So it's an authentic activity, which we love when students can do something that's actually tangible and gets them involved with the real world. And some of the best editorial projects that we've seen come from the Pulitzer Center. So there are so many resources on the Pulitzer Center that I'm going to share with you in your folder. One that is importance to us is that Local Letters for Global Change editorial contest. So even if you don't participate in the contest, this is something that you might have your students investigate within a particular topic. The Pulitzer Center is really known for investigative journalism that's not of the average day-to-day news story. So they try to represent underreported news reporting on climate issues, women, minority issues. And so there are lots of things that are already published on the Pulitzer Center website in terms of articles and investigative journalism. What students will do is they'll write a one-page letter to an elected official. It could be a city council member, it could be a school board member, it could be their state rep, where they're going to tackle the following. They're going to talk about that issue in the light of the Pulitzer Center news story. So they have to use evidence from the article. They have to talk about how that's local to them and their community. And they also have to suggest an action, which is something that we don't always ask our students to do, but it's something they really want to know. So especially in climate issues, there are so many students that are interested in that. They want to know what we can actually do about that. So really getting them to think about what those action steps would be and who are the people in power that could do them is really important as well. So this usually is something that's due around the fall. So be on the lookout for that for the 2022 cycle with the next academic year. Another great resource from the Pulitzer Center, if they want to get a little bit more behind the scenes on the stories that are reported from the Pulitzer Center, is you can actually have a journalist visit your classroom. And so this is a way to connect your learning goals to current events. And when I was speaking with a Pulitzer Center representative, they have had people come into the classroom and talk about the refugee situation with the US troop removal from Afghanistan. They have had people come in and talk about the journalistic process or photojournalism or some technical skills, if that's a journalism class topic of interest to you. And it also asks the students to talk about what they know and would like to ask the expert. So gets them excited about using the news and also thinking about media literacy. So a lot of times we don't get to meet the people behind these great pieces, but they can dig a little bit further into that topic with these visits. And so this is something the Pulitzer Center can really work with you to personalize for your school. You just let them know what you're interested in and what you're covering, and they can work out the logistics of zooming them into the classroom. Additional resources that you might see from the Pulitzer Center here, they've got great lesson plans that are already created from some of their teacher institutes and workshops. They are also partners with the New York Times on the 1619 project. So there is a whole file related to that project. And they also have a great resource in the journalist toolbox. So those would be where you see certain skills like photo editing, interviewing, things that would be really important to journalists. All right, and we're going to skip on to kind of our visual learners here. This is where our speakers come into play when we think about other creative ways of communicating ideas. So film, video, illustrations, graphic design, web pages, really think about different ways in which your students can communicate information beyond your standard kind of 5-paragraph essay. So lots of different ways that you can do this. One resource that I do want to show you, not because it might be relevant for your discipline, but they do student choice quite well, is the National History Day project. So if you are a social studies or history teacher, you might be familiar with National History Day or Ohio or Kentucky History Day. But one of the great things that they do is they'll have an annual theme each year, and it will be broad enough where students can really pick a topic. And in my experience with judging these projects, the best topics are some of those that are very specific and local, and they tell stories. So you might be talking about the civil rights movement, but from the perspective of one individual or one small group that might have been relevant to Cincinnati. Those projects do really well. But why I suggest this, even if you don't teach history, is they have a variety of ways that their students can exhibit their project. So they've got documentaries for your filmmaking students, exhibits for those of us that love trifold boards from our grade school science fair days, your writers, we've got interactive performances. And the last couple of times that I've judged National History Day, I've judged websites, which is a really great way for students who like to write and also use visual and different forms of media. So on nhd.org, you can find more resources. They have a lot of institutes where they kind of show you the ins and outs of some of these different project options. A few Years ago, I went to a week-long seminar from the Ohio History Connection out of Columbus, where they taught us the ins and outs of websites. So don't feel like you need to be an expert in any of these. They have a lot of resources on their website and a lot of summer institutes and trainings that you can go to. And if this seems kind of overwhelming now, but you just kind of want to get a feel for some of these projects and what students have done, middle and high school students do this, and they are looking for judges. So if you're interested in judging this, this Ohio History Day in our region in Cincinnati has been moved virtually. So if you want to email tlawson@cincymuseum.org, you can sign up to volunteer and just kind of get a feel for what some of these students do. Great. So there are more resources that you'll get at the end of this presentation and in your follow-up email. But I want to turn things over to our guests and the projects that they work on, because they work with students on all sorts of methods of communication. So at this point, I would like to pass things over to Spring. Spring is the director of after-school programming at WordPlay Cincinnati, and she would like to lead us through a couple different exercises and share what she does with students in the Cincinnati area.
Hello. Nice to see everyone. I'm not seeing you, but you're seeing me. So nice to be here. Thank you to the World Affairs Council for the invitation. I am the director of all school programming. Actually, I take care of putting teaching artists into all of our schools. We work with in both Northern Kentucky and the Cincinnati area. We work primarily in the Cincinnati public schools, and then we also work over in Covington. We've just started working in the Covington area, and we'd love to work there more. So we work with the intersection between belonging and storytelling. So evolving with a safe space as well as expression. So we work with creative writing and arts and healing. And so I thought it'd be fun because we've all had a day, right? We've all had some kind of day, whether it was good, bad, or ugly. We've all had a day. So I thought it'd be nice to just start with a circle exercise. So if you have a piece of paper close, I'd love for you to just make a circle on that piece of paper. Like you just make a circle. And within that circle, I'd love for you to write something that didn't quite work out today. Just something that's kind of on your mind that you wish maybe, or just maybe it's a good thing. Maybe it's something that you're excited about, or maybe it's something that really irritated you today or got under your skin. Typically, as adults, and even at working with students, I found that they write something negative down. But either is fine. So I just want you to write one word inside of that circle. And now I just want you to open your brain. There's no thought at all that goes with this. Just start writing things related to whatever's inside the circle. Just write anything that's related to whatever's inside that circle. The person, maybe they have a loud voice, or they have brown eyes, or if it's a situation, maybe it's frustrating, or it's invigorating, or maybe it's a person's name who's tied to the person inside the circle or the thing inside the circle. Any feeling is a good feeling. We don't hold feelings back at WordPlay. We express them. And I always tell people, if they're having trouble coming up with a sentence, just list. And that's kind of what we're doing right here. We're just writing words wherever you want, however you want, around the circle. I always say, as human beings, we come up against a lot of things in a day. A lot of things, a lot of people, a lot of ideas, a lot of concepts, a lot of thoughts that we have in our own heads. So what I'd like for you to do now is just close your eyes. And I just want you to kind of relax into yourself. I don't want you to think about that word or that idea or any of the things that you just wrote down. What I want you to focus on is I want you to focus on just hearing yourself. I want you to look out the window in your mind's eye. And maybe it's not a rainy day. Maybe it's a beautiful sunny day. Maybe you love snow. Maybe it's a beautiful snow-covered day. It's really bright outside. Maybe it's a rainy day because you really love rain. Maybe there's a storm. But whatever it is, you absolutely love it. And at this point, you are feeling all of the beauty of what you see. You are feeling the comfort of what you see, and everything out there is just washing away anything that may have upset you today, or may have overexcited you or overwhelmed you today. Maybe there's even, it's just a beautiful sunny day, and maybe it's springtime and all the flowers are blooming. This is your window and this is your world, and whatever you want in it is there. It's a perfect day in your mind and in your eyes. I just want you to take a couple of very deep breaths. I want you to breathe in through your nose and through your mouth, sorry, and out through your nose. I just want you to look out that window one more time and just know that this is all for you and all of its perfection and beauty and glory. You may open your eyes. This is a shortened version of this particular exercise. Now what I'd like for you to do is turn the page over, and I'd like for you to write the exact same word in the center of the circle. And I would like for you to write words associated with that word again. The same exact exercise. So what I'd like for you to express, if you will, on the chat, was there a difference between the first time you wrote down the name and the words in the circle and the second time you wrote down the names in the circle? Great.
I thought this was a good way to like reframe the conversation, because a lot of times I think we get into things because we were excited about them, and then when we're in the thick of them, it gets overwhelming, and then we forget that we had an opportunity to do something that was passionate, you know, or that we were interested in before, but we can lose perspective easily. So it was a nice way to kind of mentally reset your perspective.
Wonderful. Yes. Typically, like the first time when we're just venting, it's like you said, Kate, it's blaming, and then the second time it's like, oh, wait a minute. Okay, it's not as bad as I thought it was. So this is just a very simple arts and healing exercise that I might do with a group of students. And I might do it with even a PD full of a room full of adults, because I work with educators a lot. So, but it's nice, yes, and reframing the conversation in your mind, because some very interesting conversations take place in our minds, right? So great. I just wanted to do that. That's just a very simple little exercise that we do, maybe for a warm up or something like that. We do several different exercises in that vernacular, but that was one I thought I'd share with you. So I'd like to talk about what wordplay does. So we have several different things that we do, and I was actually going to share my screen. Let's see if we can make that happen. Well,
And you should have the ability to at the bottom, but if for some reason you don't, let me know and I can make that happen.
Yeah, I'm not sure. It's not showing. I'm sorry. It's not showing up what I have at the top of mine. So, sorry about that. Let me go here and just, I'll put in would help if I put it in the chat, and then I can get it to you.
That would be perfect. I can pull that up.
Great. Awesome. Here we go. Sorry, folks. Well, that's weird. Okay, there we go. Here are our programs. Thank you very much. Our programs, we actually just opened our spring programs. So we have, if you could click on the spring programs, please. All of our programs are free, which is really cool. So you can come and you can go to our website and you'll see spring programs. They're 6-week classes and they are absolutely free. So Mastering the Personal Essay, we have 25 teaching artists who come from all over and do all of this amazing workshopping. You'll see the ages, the day and when the classes are. You can go ahead and just scroll through there so folks can see what we're offering. Open mic, which is really cool. It's just like kind of getting up there, not being afraid of how to express yourself and tell a story, or maybe do some spoken word. We have the secret sauce, which is making podcasts, TikTok videos, all the stuff that kids are kind of into right now. So it's all storytelling and it's all expression, and that's what Wordplay is all about. So, all right, and then we have, I think we have this is Pauletta Hansel, who was 4 years ago, our very first Poet Laureate of Cincinnati. She teaches 2 classes for us. Once again, 12 and up. It's free. I love saying that. It's always free. And then, we have a songwriting class with Hillary Hahn, who just released her first album. Amazing, 6 to 9, which I think is a really awesome age group for songwriting. And then another class with Pauletta. And then love this one, Writing Funny with Ben Sandman. So it's all about jokes and like how you make people laugh and how you write comical stuff. And then we have Comics and Illustration, which is all about making your own comic strip, 10 to 14. We have a lot of interest in this one. So register soon if you have students interested. And then we do poetic collage, where it's kind of like a soul collage. That's wonderful with Ashley Devon Williamson. And then we have voices, which is basically spoken word. And we are in collaboration with Youth Poetic Performance Collaboration. So we get kids writing and then performing. And then we can also create children's books. It's just amazing. There's a lot of stuff and it's all free. So please, please, please tell your students about this. We have puppets and we have handmade books. I mean, it's amazing. There's a lot, and it's all free. And then soon we'll be opening our new spot, which is at 1556 Chase Avenue, where we will have Inklings every Saturday as well for the little ones, where we will read them stories and have them act them out as well. So storytelling and expression, that's our game and we're not changing it. So just wanted to show you this. If we could go back to the last page and we can talk about our in-school programming, school-based programs. So we also come to the schools. Now, some of that entails pay. It's fee for service. Sometimes we can write grants or go in with the school to find half of a grant to come in and bring a teaching artist in. So poetry is really, really cool. Poetry is where the students write a guided poem, and then they learn all about a thesaurus and how to revise and edit the poem. And then the students build a tree out of craft paper, and then they put the poem that they wrote onto a flower or a leaf, or maybe a snowflake. And then they have this beautiful sculptured tree that they not only wrote the poems for, but they also built the tree. And that is called our poet tree. Get it? We also have Readers Theater, which is 6 sessions where a teaching artist comes in And it can either be a piece that you've chosen as the educator or a piece that we bring along. It could be any book, Dr. Seuss, The Giving Tree. It could be anything that you'd like to work with the teaching artists. And we work with the 4 foundational elements of speaking, which would be pronunciation, enunciation, intonation or inflection, and projection, because we want to build character and we want to build storytelling and expression in our students, in every single student. Everyone has the ability to tell a story and to express themselves, from little bitties to adults. And then we also have the beautiful artists in residency programs, which are 6 to 12 weeks. And we have several different kinds of residencies. We have a playwriting residency where we teach students 4th grade and up how to actually write a play in a script. We have the I Am residency, which is all introspective. It's all about, who am I? You know, what do I stand for? What can I bring to the world? We have the a la carte residency, which basically is, do you have something you'd like to bring to your classroom, because we can create it. I write most of the curriculum. Some of our artists come with their own curriculums, but we get to do all of this work. We also have a writer's room at Aiken High School, and we do offer a writer's room in different high schools where we come in once a week and pull students to come down and just do amazing writing. And creative writing, expressive writing. We even have a podcast group who comes down to the Aiken Writers Room, and we're going to start a big podcast project. So that we do a lot of fun stuff. We also have several partners within the, here's all of our school partners down here, and that might not even be all of them. We probably have added some this year. But yeah, actually we've definitely added some this year, but we're going to update. We have to update a lot, but so that is what I wanted to show you as far as what we do, as far as our work is concerned. We are also currently, and I will send this to you, Erica. I was waiting for it to get finished. Yes, Cincinnati, there it is, Cincinnati Youth Poet Laureate Program. We are currently working with this, it's amazing, Tess, that we get to be in charge of choosing the next Youth Poet Laureate of Cincinnati. The first Youth Poet Laureate of Cincinnati, shall I say, not the next, it's the first. So please, 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 if you have a young writer who is just amazing, the application is here. We will also be holding some sessions to help with the application. So please, please, please reach out to me if you have a student who needs help. Applications are due by March 15th. And if you read through this, there are going to be so many wonderful quirks to being the Youth Poet Laureate. Maybe can we click on the link here, Youth Poet Laureate link. Thank you.
So here's
this is the application, the submission form, 4 written original poems, 1 video, and a resume. That's kind of what we're looking for. And the prizes are pretty exciting. $1,000 scholarship, engagement with City of Cincinnati Mayor and Vice Mayor, including shadowing day at the city, 5 poems published in a National Youth Laureate publication, featured on National Youth Poet Laureate Annual Anthology by Penmanship Books, mentoring sessions, and public performances with Pauletta Hansel and Manuel Idris, who were the 2 former poet laureates, and several reading and speaking engagements during that year at the Ellison Poetry Room, University of Cincinnati, and Public Library, and several other places. Whatever comes up, that Youth Poet Laureate is going to have that awesome opportunity. So please, 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 if you have young writers between 14 and 18, have them submit, because it's pretty exciting. So that's pretty much it. We also, as I said, we will have a beautiful new building open at 1556 Chase in Northside very soon. We just passed our last inspection and we will be there. We will be opening and all of our programs will be there with we're so excited. We're going to have new offices and it's very cool. And if you like, we can just take a little look at this together. We cross. This is something else that we do. We work with spoken word artists. We have a spoken word team. And if you want to, we can look at a little bit of that. Won't have to watch the whole thing because it's somewhat long, but this just gives you a little taste. This is done by 3 of our wordplay artists.
Ocean sands, dancing feet, crawling things, a jump, a skip, a beat, stone hearts of decreasing sympathy, closed systems, increasing entropy. Our minds create meaning amongst chaos as emotions scale into oblivion. I breathe through my skin like amphibians, taste the light of flesh as it shines onto me, and I'm
so we don't need to listen to all of that, but we do have several spoken word artists that we deal with and work with, and they do beautiful work. And like I said, creative writing and expression. And we also are really interested in belonging in that safe space. We work with Project Connect, which is a space for homeless and displaced women and girls. And we also work alongside Fatherless to Fearless, which is also for girls who have grown up with difficult relationships with their fathers. So I don't have anything else. What I do want to do is put my, I would like to put my, I want everyone to see it. I'd like to put my email in the chat so that if you have any questions, you can have that and you can email me, especially if you'd like for Wordplay to come to your school, or if you have a question about spoken word team that we will be developing very soon as our offices open. Yep, there it is. And feel free to contact me about any programming or anything Wordplay oriented or anything. And it's so nice to be here. Thanks again for having me. It's awesome.
Thanks for joining us, Spring. We enjoyed hearing a little bit more about Wordplay, and we hope to see you in Northside. At this point, I would like to introduce Dr. Kate Currie, who has joined us on the call here. Dr. Kate is the executive director at MAKETANK Incorporated, where she does the illustrated memoirs project with high school students here in Cincinnati. And so Kate, I'll allow you to go ahead and come off mute if you would like, and I'll go ahead and get you pinned. And Kate, would you like to share your screen or would you like me to do so?
I'm going to do my best, and if it doesn't work out, I'll reach out to you for some guidance. So my name's Kate, Carlia Currie. For the past 3 years, I've been working with English language learner students at Aiken High School to help them create illustrated memoirs. Most of my students are refugees or recently arrived immigrants, but I generally collectively refer to them as new arrival students. The aim in designing the project was to provide a means for new arrival students to bring their unique funds of knowledge, which is a phrase that I use a lot, funds of knowledge, inside the classroom. Now it's not advancing. Oh my God, this is embarrassing. I'm sorry. Oh, it is. Allow them to tell their own stories and define themselves rather than be defined by others. I also believe that the combination of written narrative and visual illustrations can provide an opportunity for these students to use and develop multiple modes of self-expression. The project positions students as the authority on a subject in their academic setting. No one knows more about their individual experience than they do. I believe that this positioning of author and authority in the classroom can increase students' intellectual self-trust and create opportunities for scaffolded learning and mentoring. I have 2 prompts and 1 rule associated with the project. The 2 prompts are that students should tell a true story from their life with them as the main character, and that their memoir should include a written narrative as well as original illustrations. The 1 rule is that students must be kind and respectful of each other. It is of the utmost importance to me that our group be a safe space for students to think about, talk about, and share their stories. And this takes courage and bravery on their part. I believe it's my job to make a safe space so the students can make it a brave space. And I'm going to shout out the fact that this isn't advancing right, so I'm just doing it randomly. So we'll just see how it works. Sharing even the simplest story requires quite a bit of bravery when you are a newly arrived language learner. Illustrating when you're not a trained artist takes courage. And some students do end up sharing stories of significant trauma. Because of that, each year I invite the school psychologist to visit our group, introduce himself and the other counselors, and explain the mental health and emotional support services available through the school and how to go about accessing those services. Students meet with me for 1 class period, 1 day per week throughout the academic year. Everyone is working at a different pace. Students come to write their stories in their own time. We spend a lot of time exploring the purposes of illustration. We discuss how illustration can be used to convey understanding and emotion, and how we can express ideas with images that might be difficult to put into words. We practice sketching and self-portraiture, and I share some of my own stop-motion animations that have no written or spoken words, but tell stories completely through the use of images. We examine illustration styles from around the world, and we look at and talk about different ways to make an image. Students slowly build up the self-confidence to experiment, embrace their own style, and discover how they might best illustrate their own story. There is a lot of discussion early on about what a memoir is. I stress that it does not need to be their entire life story, just some story from their life. So I present examples that range from a story that takes place in a time span of 5 minutes, or a day, or a week, or a year. And again, we return to the importance of the students themselves as the main character of their story. Another really important thing for me is that I do not dictate a particular story structure for the memoirs. Different cultures, different people have different ways of telling stories. It is not for me to say that my Western idea of a story arc and character development and a hook and wrapping it all up at the end is the right or best way to tell a story. And I certainly don't want to impose that structure when my students come to share their stories from their lives. So if students are struggling with writing, I will sometimes suggest not trying to start at the beginning of a story, but to start writing at the part of the story they're most interested in or feel most driven to tell, and then go back later and write beginnings and ends and tie things up. I also suggest writing their story as if they're just telling it to a friend, not trying to write for school or in some prescribed academic format, but just to write their story as they would speak it. And if they're still stuck, we just wait. And we paint and we make collages and we draw and we talk, and eventually the story always comes. I also encourage students to write their story in their home language first. Some students do not possess written literacy in their first language, but for many, writing first in their home language allows the fullest expression of their thoughts and feelings. Later in the process, they can work on translating their story to English either on their own or with help from someone else. And that may be a fellow student or a language teacher at the school or an outside resource that we find together. To date, approximately like a third to a half of the memoirs that have been written have been multilingual books. So once their story is written, the next key step in the process is for each student to create a detailed storyboard. The storyboard helps the students to conceptualize their story as a multi-paged illustrated book. And it is a big conceptual leap to go from a story that you wrote on a piece of paper or in a Google Doc that's 1 or 2 pages long, and suddenly try to envision that as a full illustrated book. So the storyboard is super important, but it's also can be really challenging. But the storyboard, I describe it to students all the time, and what it actually is a map of their book. It helps them map out their plan for their book. And then at the end of the day, when they give me their writing and this stack of images, I know how they want it all to fit together. So the steps in doing that really are we take their written story and kind of break it up into little chunks that either hold together conceptually in the writing or bring to mind really vivid illustration ideas for them. And then we break those up into pieces, number them, and then start laying it out in the storyboard. In the following weeks and months, the students will create all of their planned illustrations and complete any translations that might be unfinished. Some students immediately gravitate to an illustration style that they feel comfortable with. And they work fairly independently to complete all their page layouts. Others find it a lot more challenging to discover and embrace an illustration method. I model and encourage play and experimentation with diverse approaches to illustration, and through example and dialogue, emphasize the importance of embracing a personal style and believing in that way you are best able to convey feeling and understanding. Once the stories are written, the storyboard completed to serve as a map, and all of the illustrations rendered, I proceed to lay out the individual books in just a publishing template that I have on my computer. When I have a first draft, I share it with the students. We talk through it, look through everything, and get any changes they want to make, and then ultimately get their final approval before we have anything printed. And then I just submit books to an online publisher, and the finished copies are then given to the students and to the school. This project presents a variety of opportunities for student mentoring in the use of mentoring texts, it's a hard word to say, as well as direct peer-to-peer mentoring. So the first year that I did this project, I just used a wide variety of children's picture books to show examples of illustrated texts. Now we have the benefit of having the books that were created in the prior years to share as examples of illustrated memoirs. And it is wonderful to be able to share the work of the students' peers as examples rather than that of professional authors and illustrators. And sometimes alumni from the project will return to answer questions, offer advice, or share their experience with current students. For example, last year, a former student, Mohammed, who I think everybody in the panel probably knows, he's a rock star, agreed to join us for a meeting because we were remote for the first 7 months last year, and it was kind of a bear. So Mohammed spoke at length about his experience the prior year, shared his insights and advice, and took questions from the group for like a half hour. At the end of that meeting, Mohammed summed up his advice to everyone as, believe in yourself, find your courage, and follow all of Miss Currie's instructions. And I definitely couldn't have said that better myself, but I'm sure the words meant a lot more coming from a fellow student than coming from me. Peer-to-peer mentoring within the group takes the form of those working further ahead, sharing approaches and experience with those in earlier stages of the project, because people are all over the place. Like today I had a student completely finish their book and approve their page layout, and we're going to have the book printed this week. And I have students who are still writing the first draft of their story, and it's the end of February, which is shocking. I try not to panic. And it always all works out. Other examples of peer-to-peer mentoring are when students with written language literacy in a particular language help others as they work to create multilingual books in a home language that they speak but may not be able to write fluently. The project is flexible enough to meet each student where they are. there is a wide spectrum of complexity to the stories that students choose to tell. Emotional complexity, but also narrative and artistic complexity. As each student tells their individual story, their unique voice emerges, enhancing their sense of self. By working through the process and fully realizing their carefully planned book, students' self-efficacy is bolstered and can carry over into other academic work. This project calls for high levels of critical thinking. Students engage in complex problem solving, but they also spend time writing and thinking about how they came to know the things they know and how they arrived at a certain way of thinking in their life. Students edit, revise, and iterate multiple drafts of their creative writing and illustrating, not for the sake of getting a better grade, but to better and more fully express their thoughts and ideas. Now, I do this, they do not get a grade for this project. I'm not technically their teacher. This is just an additional added extra that is available at Aiken for a small group of ELL students. But I do think the work could take place in an academic classroom as part of an ELA project or as an art project. This project allows new arrival English language learners to bring their unique funds of knowledge inside the classroom and center that knowledge in a way they seldom have the opportunity to do otherwise. In this realm, they are the authority. Each student is the unique holder of knowledge about their own life, their views, feelings, thoughts, and experience. There is no right or wrong story for them to tell. There is only their story told in the manner they choose. Bringing this outside knowledge inside the classroom can foment intellectual self-trust that can carry over into other work in the classroom and be carried back outside the classroom into every facet of a student's life. I believe that everyone, the students themselves, their families, instructors, peers, and the broader community, can benefit from spending time with the life stories told in their own words and images of these new arrival students. So I didn't time my my random forwarding of slides. I don't know why I couldn't get it to go on its 30-second loop, but I'm just gonna go really through these last few images. And again, these are just examples of page layouts, mostly from last year's books. But you can see, I hope, how different everybody's illustration style is. This is one of my favorite things in the world, this image. That river going straight up in the air like that. I've spent hours staring at that. I love it so much. And again, it's just an example of the way different people's minds conceive of the world. I mean, the fact that, and there are a lot of ethnic Nepalese Bhutanese students at Aiken and in the North College Hill neighborhood. And I've had several of them render water that way, like straight up in the air like that, which I just adore. So this is just a, quick little sum up of some of the things that we've pulled out as being outcomes from the project. So I don't know if you guys have any questions, and if the only way to get those questions, I guess, is via the chat. I'm going to stop sharing.
So I do have a question for
yay.
you in spring before we kind of wrap up here. And if you wanted to put your contact information in the chat, Kate, just so folks can follow up with you.
Put the website and my email.
Perfect. And you can see more of those illustrated memoirs at maketankinc.org. So the illustrations were wonderful. Thanks for sharing those. So for Kate and Spring, what are some ways in which you try to develop a safe space for students to be able to share like creative processes, either at WordPlay with what you do on site or in the classroom, or what you do, Kate, with the Illustrated Memoirs project?
Well, I'll go super quick since I'm My voice is all warmed up. And by the way, Spring, I loved that circle thing. Oh my God. I wrote so many awful things the first time. And the second time it was so calm and it was really lovely. Anywho, in terms of creating a safe space, one is really, I have only one rule for the whole project, and it is you be nice, which whatever is so threatening coming from me, but because especially it's like an added extra project, and like 3 times as many kids want to come do the project as I can handle. That is the hard and fast thing, that if you're not respectful, if you're not kind to the other students, you will have to leave. So that's a little enforced safe space. The other thing is I'm working with all these ELL students, and again, they tend to be pretty respectful of each other's stories and space, because some of these kids are telling stuff that it's hard to read. I mean, it is. And some are like, oh, I got this chicken for my birthday and it pecked me and we ate it, which is hilarious, but not that traumatic. But then some are just, these gut-wrenching things. And I think they are all very aware that as a group, they share a lot of trauma. And as a result, they tend to be pretty respectful of each other. And a lot of that is also modeling me sharing things about myself, me sharing work that I've made that's, creative, written and visual work. So it kind of creates a space of sharing and not judging each other. And then again, I do invite in like staff at the school whose job is kind of counseling and providing therapeutic resources that helps with that a little as well.
So I try to build transference by finding similarities. So I usually will do some kind of color exercise with like color chips and, say, oh, well, choose a color, not because it's your favorite, but because you have a story or an anecdote that goes with it. And then you'll find all these similarities, like, oh, that was the color of my grandmother's eyes, or that was my brother's favorite color, or, oh, I had a brother who, was in an unfortunate accident as well. And through just a simple exercise like that, we build this safe place because of the similarities in our lives. Because I said, we're not as different as we think we are in our minds. We have so many beautiful similarities. Or maybe just through like an exercise like what I did with you guys. It's like, well, I was really aggravated today too. And I'm hungry and I've been hungry all day and I missed lunch because I had to stay and do this stupid quiz, I mean, it's just building like this sense of I'm not by myself. And that's what storytelling is. It's really sharing a common something that's happened to you, and you're sharing it with somebody else to get the response from another human being.
And I want to jump in and say one more thing now, because that made me think of so one of the benefits I have at Aiken is time. And I know time is a very precious resource in the school day, but having the time to just sit and be and kind of, I have a friend who uses the expression hold space a lot, but to hold space for people to say like, this is this time we're going to spend together. We don't have to be actively engaged in productive conversation every minute. We can sit here, and the joy of art making is we can like sit here and like cut out things and make collages for the next hour and just allow gradual, natural space sharing and conversation to evolve. It works wonders. And that's really, I think, the hardest part of this work is figuring out what each individual needs in terms of interaction and space and time. And some people want to be like jam every second. We are like it's just this nonstop parlay of activity and speech constantly. And then other people, we just sit quietly for like 20, 30 minutes. And then somebody else like say something and it starts a little conversation, but not forcing that, the pressure of the time and doing and getting things done is really valuable in that setting, I think. But it's very challenging and rare, I'm aware of.